Good afternoon. My name is Steve Bentley. I'm with the Calgary Climate Hub. Welcome to day 2 of our COP28 daily coverage. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yaqsi Nakota Nations, the Métis Nations of Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Also like to make a second land acknowledgement on behalf of another group of folks that have a stake in this land that we stand on today, and that is our children, our nieces and nephews and grandchildren, and all future generations. I urge you to keep them in mind during this time as we face unprecedented change and start making decisions about what comes next. Okay, this is our COP28 coverage. COP28 is a global conference on climate, the biggest of its kind. Countries of the world come here to make big promises and often deliver projects that for bragging rights, I would say, but also that are sincere and great, big, wonderful things that are advancing the cause of climate in the world. It's not without its controversy, and this one more than ever, given that it's being hosted in a petrostate, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, in the capital city of Dubai. And of course, the president is Sultan Al Jaber, who is a CEO of an oil company. This is unprecedented, and for a conference that has always balanced hope and cynicism amongst people, I think it's fair to say this is the most cynical yet. There's a much bigger presence of oil companies. Increasingly, it seems like there's more and more each year. There has been some news so far. Well, actually, maybe just a quick update on the big topics of this year: the global stock taking, which is a process for countries and stakeholders to see where they're collectively making progress towards meeting the goals of the Paris Climate Change Agreement and where they're not. A loss and damage fund that was, I guess, successfully put through yesterday on day 1. That's for the world's richest countries to help world's poorest and most vulnerable countries hit by climate disaster, largely not of their own making, a fund for that. Of course, the devil's in the details, as it is for every bit of this conference. Another big phrase that's coming up is a fossil fuel phase out versus an unabated fossil fuel phase out, and the difference there being relying on the controversial technology of carbon capture and storage. There's quite a lot of skepticism from folks in the climate world, me most certainly included, regarding the use of that technology and its ability to do what's necessary, and the reliance of that so that oil and gas can continue to do exactly what it's always been doing. And of course, the other big goal is a global tripling of renewable energy by 2030. Okay, so today's show, our guest is our on the ground in Dubai COP28 greenwash correspondent, our Debunction Junction correspondent, Dr. Joe Vipond. He's with the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, aka CAPE, and a Hub board member at large. Dr. Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Bentley.
So you've had a full day in here for our audience's awareness. It's 6 a.m. my time, and it is 5 p.m. Joe's time. Is that correct, Joe?
Well, I don't know what time it is anymore after 2 days of jet lag, but it's sometime that I think on the clock it says 5 p.m.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Are you hearing any big news today that you can report to us, or?
You know, I haven't heard of anything. The loss and damage fund was pretty big. There was a very comedic moment this morning when Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister for Environment and Climate Change, was talking about Canada's contribution, and people were like, did he say 16 million? Did he say 60 million? And there was this real debate. 60 million doesn't seem like a lot out of 100 billion, but it couldn't have been 16 million. But yeah, it was 16 million. So that was probably the most amusing moment of the day. But no big news that I've heard of. Right now, it's called the World Climate Action Summit, and that's basically where all the leaders are here. Some notable exceptions being Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau. We've heard rumors that Justin Trudeau wasn't able to attend because it was too politically hot because of the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel, and he couldn't come to the region without commenting on it. So instead of commenting on it, he just didn't come to the region. So it's unfortunate to, at a time when everything seems to be on fire, that our leaders aren't showing up.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to think about that is the climate emergency keeps going on in the background while every other emergency seems to be getting worse. It's just that's what we have lined up for the future. Okay, so Joe, you've been to COP for Scotland, you've been to COP for Egypt, and now here in the UAE. What are you noting? Are you noticing a big difference on the presence of big oil at these events?
Well, actually, I've picked my location pretty intentionally because right behind me here is the Energy Pavilion.
Okay.
And I just took a walk through there for the first time, like literally half an hour ago. And I found the OPEC pavilion. There's an OPEC space, and there's also a natural gas exporting countries forum. And it made me infinitely sad, actually, to be in there. I did a little video of my first debunction junction is of that space. And you can see the guy getting quite irate behind me as I'm filming him. He was in the space by himself, which I guess is a testament that, right next door to him was the World Meteorological Association's event space, and it was packed with people. Like, what's going on? What's happening? What's the state of our physical the physical science on climate? Totally packed, and then his space was completely empty.
Maybe a little voting with our feet going on there, maybe.
Yeah. So that was good. The other place that's in there, which is a Canadian initiative, it's the CRIN, and I can't remember exactly what it means, but I think it's Clean Resource Initiative Network or Clean Resource Innovation Network, something like that. And they have a space in there, and it also was kind of equally sad. So it's certainly not the most dynamic area of COP, and I think good.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning to our audience that OPEC, that's the oil producing country,
exporting countries.
This is the first year they've actually had a full-blown pavilion. It's another sort of new bit of breaking ground there, breaking ground in the bad direction, obviously. But it's interesting to hear that it's not a very popular pavilion, and maybe that shouldn't be surprising. I guess the other big piece of news, heading into this on virtual day zero, we find out that there was a leak from, if not President Al-Jaber, COP28 President Al-Jaber himself personally, certainly from the UAE and involving his company ADNOC, making a bunch of deals with countries that are traveling to COP for the climate conference. Have you had a chance to look into that at all? Do you have as our on the ground debunction junction correspondent? What's your feedback on that?
I'm not paid enough to be an investigative reporter, so I don't actually have any breaking news on that. I can tell you that from our perspective, we have two premiers coming here, Scott Moe and Premier Smith. And the Alberta government delegation has over 100 delegates on there. I've heard upwards of 140.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I've been looking for civil society from Alberta here, and there's not a lot. I think we can count it on less than two hands, maybe less than one hand. The majority of those being Indigenous peoples, which is great. I think a lot of them don't even consider themselves Albertans per se, but living on the land of Alberta. So it's pretty lopsided, right? Like 140 versus like a handful of us.
Sure.
So I'm glad I'm here at least to have that voice.
Yeah, and since we're debunking a lot of this greenwash together, Joe, you over there and me over here in Calgary, I'll just my own perspective on the Al-Jaber, ADNOC, UAE doing this engagement to try to sell more oil and gas. I listened to the president's response to that, And what I as being a climate guy who's been dealing with denialists for over a decade now, you get used to seeing where the wiggling room is and where they're hiding. And what I heard in his response is that, I never saw this document. That document never came by my eyes. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And what was missing was an unequivocal no. Nobody in my government did that. No, nobody in my company, ADNOC, would do that because of blah, blah, blah. So there was not an unequivocal denial that anybody in his government would be doing that. And so I'll just say to President Al-Jabbar, you're suspect. I don't believe you. I absolutely don't believe you. I hope that doesn't get you in trouble, Joe. I know it's a petro state.
We actually do have quite a bit of security efforts to keep things locked down. So I'm very aware that this isn't probably the safest place to be throwing criticism around. So I'm glad that you're doing it.
Fair enough. Yeah, if we got to break you out, I'll do whatever I can. So just as we're kind of finishing off that topic, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry called Al-Jabbar a terrific choice. He said, as an oil executive, he understands and accepts the need to transition away from oil. What's the feeling on the ground with folks that you talk about? Can we have hope that this person is sincere?
I can't speak to his sincerity. I've never got to hang out with him. What I can say is that I'm seeing progression on the language. So as you mentioned, this is my third COP. I can't really speak to what happened in the first, 25, but at COP26, there was the talk about phasing out or phasing down coal. And then that continued last year. And this year, the language that's supposed to be, we're aiming for, is the phasing down of unabated fossil fuels.
Right.
If that happens, it'll be the first time that fossil fuels is in there. I recognize, and I think everybody recognizes, that's not enough. We actually have to get off of fossil fuels, and the whole unabated part is, well, show me a place where they're actually successfully using carbon capture storage to really get the carbon out of the processes. And never mind that only ever deals with scope 1 and scope 2. And not the scope 3, the actual combustion of the fossil fuels. So it's not enough, but boy, that's a lot of progression in 3 years. I personally am terrified because I see what's going on with the physical science, and I know that we have to accelerate things way faster than this incredibly bureaucratic, slow, diplomatic process will allow. But at the same time, there is progression. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, and I end up running into folks. It's very easy for folks to say that these conferences are all useless and it's all it's all for show. But so I feel like some of the big news also going in was America is using the WAR Act to ramp up production on heat pumps. Did you hear about that at all?
I did not hear about that. That's pretty exciting.
Sounds pretty good,
Canada,
right?
your move.
Yeah, and once America gets serious about something like that, it's kind of reminiscent of when China got serious about solar panels, and the overall effect with solar panels went down in price. So that's an important little piece. I did see that you're on a panel with Zepra Berman the other day.
Sephora, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about?
It was a press conference. It was specifically. It was hosted by Environmental Defense. The initiative was to stop or at least get ahead of some of the messaging that Premier Moe and Premier Smith are bringing here. They have a very specific agenda to, I think, try and prolong the exit from fossil fuels as slow as they can. I'm not sure this is the right space for that. My sense is it's not going to be particularly welcome, and I think they'll find it difficult, even with this being the fossil fuel COP. But we'll see, I guess. So I'm glad I'm here to counter their message.
That's yep. So am I. I guess the other thing I want to ask you about is I know that there's a big movement by a lot of the world's health organizations to start getting some health language into COP. Is there anything you can speak to on that?
This is the first time that that health will have its own day. That happens on Sunday, so in 2 days from now. That's pretty exciting for us, and I think the reason why it's becoming more part of the story, the climate story, is because it is that connection to the human part of things, right? Like, we are impacted by the climate crisis through its impacts on our health, and so it's important for people to understand it's not just polar bears and frogs that are getting in trouble here. It's humans. So in particular, the nurse and the physician voice are some of the more important messenger voices out there. So we're trying to galvanize the health sector to be more active on this issue.
Shout out to the nurses and physicians. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I know CAPE does a lot of really good work on that front, and you know, we're grateful for you for your work on that front. I guess a question that I don't have an answer to, but I'm wondering if you hear anybody talking about it, is how do we mitigate this takeover of this conference by oil companies? Is there, you know, it really feels like, to me, it feels like a slap in the face to me, and you know, going forward, like, it's gone from it's only grown in the time that you've been going, the presence of oil and gas there. And so what kind of pushback might you imagine us being capable of to ensure this doesn't happen? I realize that you might not have an answer available to that. There might not be an answer, but I'd be curious.
No, there's answers. Let's make some answers. Well, how about we have some rules, right?
Yeah.
Like, that would be the way of doing it. Like, we don't allow, I don't know, dog kickers to be at the SPCA meetings.
Right.
You know, they aren't invited.
You know, the phrase that I like, Joe, is we don't invite mosquitoes to a malaria conference.
Yeah, there you go. So or tobacco lobbyists to a lung cancer conference.
Sure.
You know, there should be set walls, fences around where they are. The argument that I hear against that is that, you know, the oil and gas are so intertwined with this issue that they have to be present. You know, if they had been genuine, engaged citizens on this process over the years, maybe I could see that as being an argument. But the more you read about their role in getting us to this point of extreme danger, the more you realize that they really do have an agenda that's not equivalent to saving the planet. It's and to be fair, you know, I heard that if we were going to achieve 1.5 degrees, they lose $3 trillion. And so for some people, money is a really important motivation. And so I could understand why, for those people, this would seem like a threatening process and something that they must subvert. But for me, it was motivated more by like staying alive and keeping ecosystems functional. It just, I don't see how they bring a role here. The way you engage them is you set regulations that cause their product to be burned less, to the point where they disappear.
The phrase that I keep hearing is that big oil needs to have a seat at the table. And in this particular case, big oil is driving the bus as far as, you know, as far as where it's held and who's in charge. And, you know, obviously we'll have
big oil needs to have a seat at the table while they light it on fire and break the table with an axe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I've got a question that I want to ask you that we'll use for a later podcast. But before I do, I guess I just want to make sure that, we've covered anything else that you might want to chat about or let us know about while you're over there.
It's going to be an exciting week. I'm still kind of getting through that jet lag. It's very overwhelming. They initially said 70,000. Now I'm hearing 90,000. I'm hearing 100,000. I don't know how the numbers changed so much. But to put it in perspective, the next largest COP was last year's, and it was 35,000. So people are interested. People are here because they want to be a part of the change. Mm-hmm. And there does feel a lot of momentum towards getting stuff done. Starting off with a victory with the loss and damage fund passing without opposition yesterday was a good start. We just got to make sure that's not the be all and end all of this COP.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what we're looking to do for our next podcast is we're going to talk about the best and worst in 2023. You know how come December, there's a lot of sort of retrospectives and look to the year that was. So I'm going to ask you for what you think the best climate story of 2023 was and what the worst climate story of 2023 was.
Wow, no advance notice, Steve? Just like throw it out there. I just got to.
Yeah, I got it. I want you fresh, buddy. I want you fresh.
Well, the worst climate story for me was that my summer vacation was canceled. Like we were planning on, as a family, going to Utah and doing a rafting trip, and we got a phone call from the rafting company saying we couldn't go. Now that might seem like petty and selfish, but I really wanted to share Utah with my kids because I just think it's such an incredible space. And the fact that I now have to contemplate, well, I can no longer think of bringing them to Utah in July or August because it's too dangerous I don't know. It makes it very real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the best story of the climate. There's not a lot of good news coming out of Alberta. Let's hope that the best story of the climate will be an oil emissions cap in the next couple of weeks while we're at COP. We've been told that there should be a framework announced during this time, and then the draft regs out by early next year. So can I hold off on saying what my favorite thing is until we decide whether that actually appears?
Yep, I think, well, we do have pretty decent access to you there, Joe, so we can come back for an update along a reasonable timeline there. Thanks again for
my most anticipated good news story.
That's it. Well, thanks again for not only for coming on the show, but for the work you're doing debunking the mis and disinformation that you encounter over there. I think it's important for us to do. There's quite a lot of folks aligned on the other side to make sure that disinformation flows freely. So I appreciate that, and thanks for all the work that you do.
All right, Steve, thanks for having me on, and to everybody in Canada, keep pressuring the government. It really does make a difference for them to hear from you. Call your MLA, call your MP, call the environment minister, let them know that you care.
Yeah, and that reminds me for our viewers and listeners that the Alberta Talks is doing a mass call out of MLAs over the next few weeks. It might even be in conjunction with the day of protest with COP, but I will have more details for tomorrow's show. But yeah, that is certainly one of the things that we can all do to start making a difference. That concludes today's show, but the live coverage continues every day, all day on the Calgary Climate Hub socials. We're not doing a show for Saturday and Sunday, but we are reporting via every channel we have at our disposal throughout the weekend and every day of COP. I want to thank our sponsors, Skyfire Energy, Greengate Power, and Radical Balance. And yeah, thanks once again to Dr. Joe Vipond. We'll keep up the great work, and everybody, let's talk to those MLAs and let them know that we need climate action, and we want an end to things like moratoriums, and we need to start getting serious about climate. It's 2023. The world's on fire. Thank you. I'm Steve Bentley. This is the Calgary Climate Hub's Air. Very appreciative for the platform. We'll talk soon.